Good afternoon, pop fans. Mickey Bannell here. Today we're going to be having a look at this is a kind of complimentary video to the video I made for Pink Panther. In my usual style, I did the sloppiest version ever because I can't be bothered to practice, but that's not important. Sentiment, my dear friends, is everything. Now, what I'm going to show you today are two things. First of all, I'll show you the Pink Panther theme and my kind of take on it, which is basically a bastardized version of other ones that I'd found on YouTube. Although most of the theme I took off the original orchestra recording of what was it, Henri Mancini or whoever wrote it. Yeah, Henri Mancini it was. Exactly. And particularly the B section, because I didn't find anyone on YouTube that actually did what I considered to be correct for this middle section. This section, there was this really beautiful part in the middle, etc. So we'll have a kind of look at that part particularly in detail, because some lovely chords there and it works really well on the guitar. In fact, the whole tune works so well on the guitar because it's in E minor. Now, the first part with the Pink Panther theme, the famous first thing is got to know what chords we're playing over. So it goes from E minor to C7th, and the second time it does the same thing, but this time it goes to an F7. Repeats that whole section, and the last part is basically variations on these two diminished chords, or this kind of implies also C9, that chord there where you're actually fingering two of the strings here, and then these ones are, well, you can see that to a B9, very similar to the B7th, but this time the only difference with the B7th, instead of playing this string open, we're putting a C there, which I'm not sure if that's is that flattened ninth or something. The guitar freaks will fill you in on that in the comments down below, but anyway, that can be substituted for on the top four strings, or put a bass note on it and play it like that if you want. So just to show you that as well, there's got a B there, and then this is a typical gypsy jazz type of chord where you've got the E, I don't know, that is B flat, that's a C sharp. Okay, so it's only like a 3-finger chord there. The A string's muted, so there's these notes. Back to there. So that's basically all you need to know for the chords. Now, I'm trying to put two other things mixed into this concept. I'm putting a kind of fingerstyle bass line on the bottom as well. But don't ask me exactly where it goes. I'll try and write it out and post it on my website on Mickey Pannell, that's MIKIPANNELL.com, where I've got all the materials, books, videos, everything you need to kind of complement these videos. So we're beginning the melody on the A string, C sharp. So but we all know that if you want to do the simplified version, you can just play that without the bass notes. But when I arrive here at the E, I'm also going to be playing the bottom E at the same time, like this. So the second notes that we got there, what's that? That's an F sharp on the D string to a G. And I think also there I'm playing a B bass note. So at the end of each phrase there's also a bass note there as well. Now depending on how fast you play it, kind of whether you're playing with a bass player or whatever, you might want to omit that, or you might want to do it a little bit more fingerstyle style and play a nice clean bass note. But I find that this one works well, kind of hitting the note quite randomly. So let's just go through the melody again. So the next part begins on the E flat and goes to E. I have to play this fast to get it. So the notes are these. Again. And again on the last beat of it, each one I'm either putting the E bass note or the B bass note. So again, whole thing. So at the moment we've arrived at the B note with an E bass note this time. So that figure appears many times in this. So the first time that it resolves to, I think it's the, and let me play the whole thing and we'll see where it goes. Yeah, so the notes to finish off the phrase will be E, so I'll repeat that again, it's E, G, which is on the D string, and then it's got this section that kind of walks down. Now this part's interesting because the first two notes you just play singly, but this is where we're putting the C 7th chord. So we're basically doing a walk down to try and get to this C 7th, or if you want to play the top note you can make it a 9th. So that's C there, then we've got an E on this string, and these two are covered slowly. And to get down there, this is where it gets interesting. We've got note on the E, and then you can put a passing chord here, which is C sharp 9th, the same as the C 9th we're going to, but it's just one above. And this time we're going to just play two notes from the chord. Basically you can play any two of the notes that you want, but I tend to play the root notes plus the B above, and then the same there. So the figure is actually, and the melody that finishes it is, so you've got the G string open, E, and then the pull off to D. Now that's the most simplified version, but the ideal thing would be to try and get the alternating bass thing happening, and even if you can do it already, this kind of percussive slap that a lot of people do. So once we're down to the C7th or the C9th, you can alternate the bass a bit. Again, doing it too kind of Shea Atkins might actually ruin it, because you know that's not really the feel of the tune. But you know, implying this with a little bit of percussion, always nice. So I'll play that whole first section again up to speed so you can hear how it's supposed to sound. Then the second time round, what you're going to play this time is all the strings open from G up to the top E to go into the F7th, or if you put the top one, that can become an F9th as well. So the second part. And again, once you get to this chord, because the melody's basically finished and you're playing rhythm now, you can once again put the kind of slap it on here if you want, and alternating bass note. Now, if you don't know how to do this slapping thing, it's a great thing to learn, but the way to learn it is not when you learn a new tune like this, is to take a tune that you already know really well and try and introduce it at a nice slow pace. And there's a certain way of doing it, but I've never really kind of figured out what I do or what other people do, but because obviously you don't want to mute everything, but you want to do this quite clean slap, which I think I do with the kind of back of my hand somewhere down here, but you'd have to. So it's quite a clean, very quick movement, and very particular damping technique. So that is basically the whole of the first section, except for the famous lick at the end, which, going back to the beginning, it's the first part. Now this da-da-da-da, you can play it as one note, but I listened many times to the original recording of this, and it appears that they do the root note with the fifth and then doubled on top. So what we've got is basically this kind of sort of punk rock type of chord, that type of thing, where you're doing. Now let me just do it again. So yeah, I think I might be wrong about this, but we got these two. And that whole thing moves right up to the original tone of the tune, which is E. Okay, I hope that's slow enough for you. If you want it any slower than that, just install Google Looper, and that automatically allows you to change the speed in the settings of this. But so it's quite important, that little phrase there, especially when you get it going fast. It's a little blues phrase, kind of muted at the end. And again, if you really want, you can stick the kind of walking bass line and the slap on this part. Wait. We'll do it at the top. What else? So that's the whole of the first section covered. The structure of the original piece one, it played the whole kind of melody as like a head. I think possibly twice, maybe with two different instruments, and then it went into this kind of B section, and then it actually went into like a sort of solo kind of jazz section, which is really nice because the chords are so simple. It's very easy to improvise if you know your jazz arpeggios. If you don't know them, I've got this video that I'm always trying to promote because it's basically the way I learned how to play guitar, called 50 Awesome Movable Jazz Arpeggios. And if you learn those, all you need a few basic chords plus the arpeggios. You can do any style of music anywhere, doing whatever. That's the real secret of this. So I posted all my best secrets, if you like, online. Now the middle section is really interesting because it's got this kind of key change. The first part is based around a slide up with a minor 7th chord from F minor 7th to G minor with a bass line. So it's like, and then it does exactly the same slide from A minor 7th up to a B flat minor 7th, followed by the bass line. Now, which bass notes you choose to put, basically up to you, because I think almost any walking style bass line seems to work, and you'll make it a bit funkier if you're. And then I found this nice chord which basically worked out by ear off the horn sections, which don't ask me what it is though. Oh, I know what it is. Yeah, this is a type of minor 6th inversion. I've seen Wes Montgomery do this. So it's kind of based off this A minor 6th. No, it's actually B flat minor 6th chord, which if you look at it like this, any of you Django fans out there know this because this is the one in minor swing, that type of thing. Well, this one at the top is like basically a variation of that, and then the whole chord shifts down. And then you take the top note off when you get down here, and you stick it on the G on the bottom. So to go through that section, then this part, that phrase I actually got off some other guy on YouTube who I should credit. I think he's a Portuguese guy. If you kind of put in, you know, Pink Panther fingerstyle version, some guy comes up, and I've completely forgotten his name, but I borrowed this straight off him. So you got this kind of diminished or 7th style chord top, which begins at E, got a G there, the top note, and then the very top string you're going to be doing a pull off and re-fingering it one down. Move the whole thing up, as it's a kind of sort of diminished sounding chord, you can move it up 3 semitones and do the same thing. I absolutely love that. And And then to finish it, I've found these also on the original orchestra recording, all done with saxophones, I think it was, trumpets, whatever. But this is a diminished E diminished chord, where you've got the E bass note, and then you've got this little 3 notes. What we've got there, there's a C sharp, there's a G, and then there's a B flat. So all of that is on top. I play it with the fingering of a gypsy jazz chord. And then you can just move this whole thing down. This is the part, I think, in the video where I kind of do this ascending thing. I think I played it with one hand like that. So it's like you get the idea. Just got to put a bit of showing off in now and again, kind of keep the audience awake. Then again, the first sliding minor 7th, and this is my favourite part of the whole tune. This is absolutely amazing, this phrase. I think that's just such an amazing piece of harmony. But it basically functions like this. So you got, first of all, you got the open note, and on top of it there's a little triad, which is the G open, the D, and then the E open. So there's actually you're using your thumb and then these 3 fingers together on the top like that, and the whole thing moves up and down again. So is another coolest. And then it basically does the same figure but with a slight variation, with a different inversion, which is this, just your standard I think it's something like that. Let's do it quickly. So you get the basic idea. It's a diminished chord, it's just moving around. Obviously it's all done with wind instruments there. But this just goes to show how much mileage you can get out of like one chord, moving it around, which might seem a bit kind of vulgar on the guitar, but these you know, jazz composers did exactly the same thing with big band swing. They had a whole orchestra playing some big diminished chord and then just moving it down, semitones up, semitones, etc. So to finish this phrase, I'll play the whole thing again. And then I'll do a thing here. Which is these 2 notes. It's basically around a G minor chord. You can do anything there really. And it's going to end with which is an E flat 7th, E flat 9th, D 9th, back to the G, which I should have mentioned earlier. The G minor is the tone of the whole of the key change. I didn't actually mention that before, but all this, you have to think that the whole of that section there is in G minor. And then from there you have to get back to E minor. Well, there's a million different ways you can do that. The one I did on the video was I just made, I think, an open note and the top of a chord possibly. I can't even remember how I got there. Let's have a try. Oh no, that was it. Yeah, it was using the top three, the E minor and the bottom. We have to watch the video because I can't actually remember what I did there. That was all in the heat of passion. And this final section that we looked at, you can do it fingerstyle, you can do it kind of jazzy, you can do it with the kind of percussive slaps. Sounds a bit like wild saxophone from the first Stray Cats album. Wild saxophone, etc. And then we're basically back to the E. Now on the original, there was a jazz solo section where they had this kind of interesting key change where I think, if memory serves me well, it actually went to F sharp. Oh, sorry, F minor, and then played the whole of the same sequence with one of the instrumentalists soloing over that. That obviously doesn't lend itself so well to the guitar like all the other parts, but definitely it'd be a good place to put some nice jazzy arpeggios, whether you do it in E minor or F minor is up to you. You get the idea, is you can put all those arpeggios which I put in the 50 awesome arpeggios video, and you can throw all those in there. There's literally a 4 or 5 chord sequence, and then you're back to the beginning to play the whole thing again. Once you get the melody down, it's really nice if you can get the sort of swing feel, the percussive thing, and even a bit of the alternating bass, because that's what really brings the whole tune to life and adds the kind of groove to it. The only things I haven't actually mentioned, it was the introduction, which is something along the lines of this blues lick that goes something like this. I can't even remember. It was based around those notes. So that's just the octave at the 12th fret. You got the A there, and you're hammering on and off the middle note. You can put the G there and resolve it back, so you got the full octave if you want, and that's. And the only other part which I didn't mention was the very final section where it goes between E minor and 7th. I can't remember exactly how I did that either, but the idea is sort of. Yeah, I can't remember that part, but basically it's all based around the movement between those two with a diddly from the actual that's kind of in there as well if you listen to how I did it on the original video, but I can't actually remember how to play it just in isolation. I think I've covered just about everything that was in that one. I'm sure there's a ton of other stuff that you'd like me to talk about, and I'd love to hear your ideas also, so you know, fill up the comments section, any questions on anything you want clarifying, and check out the other videos too where I'll show you how to do all the different techniques and the arpeggios. Great, see you soon.